Afternoon. We're going to get started. To my committee chair, our member is coming. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. It is May 8th. This is Land Use Sustainability and Resilience Committee. It's 3:30. We're going to get started on our agenda. For those of you watching at home, you can call in for public comment if you'd like. You can dial 669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 926-9699-1265. You'll press star 9 to be placed in the queue to speak. Individuals in the queue will be prompted to unmute by pressing star 6 to speak. There, we have folks here in the chambers. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a comment card at the back of the room, and one of our clerks here will take that from you, and then we'll have you speak at public comment. So we'll start with number 1, public comment. This is general public comment for items not on our discussion calendar today. Do we have anyone online wishing to speak or in chambers for public comment agenda item 1? Okay, I know there's a little lag. I know there's none in the on the phone lines waiting to speak, but we'll give it a few seconds just to make sure we don't cut anyone off. And if there are any public comments via online and we move on, please let us know and we'll circle back. All right, we will move on. For now, we'll close public comment for agenda item 1, general public comment. We'll move on to the discussion calendar. Agenda item number 2, use of glyphosate-based products of weed abatement purposes update. And Jim Lowery, Senior Field Operations Manager, will be here to present to us. And I'm glad I said it right this time, glyphosate. I've been practicing. Hi, Jim.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Council members. Jim Lowery, Public Works Street Division, Senior Field Operations Manager. Here today to give you a quick update on the use of glyphosate-based products in Public Works. Hope I go the right way here. So a little background, in 2019, the City Manager implemented a temporary memorandum on our product that we used. In January of 2020, City staff presented an update to the City Council in regards to the memorandum. February of 2021, City Council approved rescinding the moratorium and allowing us to resume the use of glyphosate. So what is glyphosate? It's a systematic herbicide that kills the entirety of the weed, including the root system. It's the same product that we can buy at Home Depot, Lowe's. In fact, I bought some this weekend myself. And we believe that it's good to have good weed abatement. Is important to the city to maintain clean and safe and resilient city. So the EPA, their Environmental Protection Agency, reviews pesticides and herbicides, and one of them being Roundup, has been approved by the California Department of Pesticides Regulation, as well as our own Riverside County Agricultural Commissioner. Also, some of the findings the EPA has released is that there is no risk to the human health. Children are not more sensitive to this product, and that it does not cause cancer in humans. So some of our best practices, it's typically a spot treatment using dye, as you can see in the picture, that is used so that the applicator can see and how much he's applying to the surface so that it's not overdone or spraying the same weed 2 or 3 times and wasting the product. It's usually a vehicle-mounted sprayer, and we do not spray in high wind events. Notification goes out to daycare and schools in the event we're going to be in their area spraying. Solution-wise, we use a 1% solution, which is equivalent to 1 gallon of the solution to 100 gallons of water. So it's diluted down pretty far, and it's used on an as-needed basis. Some of the local agencies, City of Irvine does not use pesticides or herbicides. They're manual and organic removal. City of Menifee only removes manually in emergency or an abatement situation, and Los Angeles County restricts it altogether. Cost comparison-wise, annually, the cost us about $25 per acre to spray the I can't even say it now, glyphosate-based product at a rate about 2 to 3 times a year, for an annual cost of $50 to $75 annually, not including labor cost, versus the non-glyphosate-based product, which is $32 annually per acre, which needs to be sprayed 7 to 8 times more at a cost of $227 to $259. And at the bottom, you can see the comparison and the difference per acre. And this contributes to the strategic priority number 2, goal 2.3. And that concludes our presentation, and we ask that the committee receive and file this update for Public Works regarding the use of glyphosate. And I do have lots of people here from the county, the state, other departments here at the city, if there's any questions that we can answer for you.
Perfect. Thank you for the presentation. Unless my colleagues have some clarifying questions, we can move to public comment. Okay. Let's see if there, so we'll probably circle back with you,
Okay.
Jim, and
Thank you.
the other folks. So we'll move to public comment. We'll start with those that are in chambers, and we'll start with Megan. And I would say your last name, but I'm not sure I can, and there's only one Megan here. Brusso, thank you.
Councilmember Edwards. Thank you to all the council and to all of the city staff here today. My name is Megan Brusso. I am the acting executive director of Inland Empire Kids Outdoors. We are a local 501c3 nonprofit that has a membership base of 2,000 families who are registered members who we represent today, the overwhelming majority living in the city of Riverside. I come to you today not only on behalf of those 2,000 families, but as a zoologist and having spent the greater part of the last decade as your Inland Empire waterkeeper. At that time, I served under Robert Kennedy Jr. for that decade, and so of course I closely watched and actually spoke with Bobby many times as his case progressed. Now that case was won, and so what we've seen that is FDA approved, all of those findings that were accepted by the FDA were actually done by the actual companies, Monsanto and Bayer, that own this product. So obviously, when Mr. Kennedy won his lawsuit on behalf of his client who did get cancer by simply applying it in this manner, he set precedent. And since then, there has been a slew of other law and legal decisions that have upheld that. But more importantly, there are cities, states, and even countries, in addition to the WHO, the World Health Organization, that say that this is not okay, it is not safe. And so I would say that there is at least an equal amount of information that needs to be dived into here. We would love to see this go before City Council after giving ample opportunity to have some research and presentation on both sides. I can tell you, as somebody who has spent 2 decades in Riverside on conservation work, all of our families, all of our networks, nationally even, are worried about why are we conserving and opening these spaces and encouraging children and families out into parks that have just been sprayed in many instances with something that is like dominoes being proven to actually be carcinogenic. And so I ask you on behalf of the 2,000 families, the beloved children and pets of this community, to at least move this further, because we are the city of arts and innovation, and this is not innovative, this is the way of the past. And with such a marginal difference, to eliminate any question, I really think it should just be a hands-down decision under our new city manager that we go with the investment in our family's health. And I appreciate you so much for your time and your service.
Thank you. We'll have Erin. Is it Swinford? Did I say that right, Erin? Yeah. Great. I hate mispronouncing people's names because they do it to me all the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having this meeting today, and thank you for your service. I just wanted to talk about, as it was mentioned before, this glyphosate has been outlawed in many cities in California and across the U.S. So we're not like doing something new or different, but actually jumping on a bandwagon that's already coming and happening. Riverside is called the Emerald City. It's also considered a green city. And I think a part of that is also caring about how we take care of weeds and whether we spray with chemicals or do it more manually. Megan already mentioned that the EPA did say that it's safe, but the World Health Organization classified it as glyphosate as a carcinogen to humans. And the CDC, there was a new study on glyphosate that confirms the regulatory agencies are failing to protect us from exposures to toxic chemicals. And what that study said is that 80% of urine samples collected from 2013 to 2014 contain glyphosate. Glyphosate. I don't know why that's so hard to say. 87% of the 650 children tested detected levels of toxic herbicide glyphosate in their urine. So scientists have known for years that glyphosate is linked to increased risk of cancer, and the study after study demonstrates how unambiguous glyphosate is in our environment and in our systems, and the children are more exposed than adults. And I think that's also an important thing to talk about. There was an act that was passed called the Healthy Schools Act, which specifically targeted like not spraying in our schools, near our children. And that's not happening in Riverside. We are spraying there. So I just wish that, yeah, like Megan said, if we could continue this to the next discussion and allow it to be brought before the whole council and voted on by you guys and have more community input, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have Derek Swinford.
Hi guys, thank you. I would just like to start off with the how the EPA collects its data for science, like the studies that they did. When the EPA does studies like this, the data that they use to make their decisions on if something's safe or not is actually provided by the chemical companies. The EPA doesn't do its own science. So Monsanto, they submit the data to them and say, okay, this is what our scientists found. But partially some of the lawsuits that have happened are because they didn't submit all the data, because not all the data was in their favor. They submitted the data that was. The other thing that I would like to talk to you is about the weed abatement. A lot of what's happening in the city is you're really only supposed to spray weeds that are less than 4 inches tall. And I've personally witnessed Public Works spraying weeds that are 6 feet tall. Yeah, you know, and that's they say that it's not as effective when you're just spraying weeds like that. And then also driving vehicles around at 10, 15 miles an hour with sprayers that go out the side of the truck. You know, you're supposed to spray the chemical in no wind more than 10 and no less than 3 mile an hour winds. We normally have 8 to 10 mile an hour winds, and when you're driving a vehicle around at 8 to 10 miles an hour, you're spraying in 20 mile an hour winds. So you have this thing called drift, where the chemical floats through the air when they're driving by parks and what have you. The other thing too is not protecting areas where people actually walk that they do treat. People walk in areas hours after they treat because they don't know, because there is no warnings. Especially up Chicago, I watch kids walk up that trail from Poly High School. They come down from Indolka Park and they walk on the right side in the dirt and then cross into Canyon Crest. That area, I've watched them just drive a truck up the side of the road, just spraying out the side, treating that whole area. So I think that, this is just a problem that people just don't want to make the change, because, doing it differently is a little bit harder, and you got to do more research, and maybe there is more labor. But, I have no problem. Even if you raise my taxes a little bit to pay for this, I wouldn't have a problem with it, because I think it's that important. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. There are no callers with their hands raised, and that was our last public comment here in the chamber. So I will ask my colleagues if they have any questions for staff. Who wants to kick us off? Don't all jump at once.
I'll kick us off. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to those who gave the reports and also who came and spoke today. My question is, I know that we did have the moratorium on the use of glyphosate when all three of us were elected, actually, and then we had several conversations about this issue, and the majority, though not unanimous, vote was to continue the use of glyphosate in the city, and I, full disclosure, did vote in support of that. And it was because, based on all the research that I had seen at that time, it seemed to support the decision that we could use it safely and that we were using it safely in the city. So, my first question is, have there been any changes in research, in legal cases since that time, since that discussion? To be of city staff.
Yeah, we do have a few other public agencies who have joined us today, council members. So I don't know if any questions would ultimately be directed towards either the county or the state, as they do regulate the use of glyphosate or other herbicides within the city. But we continue to apply glyphosate in accordance with county regulation. And none of the approvals that were in effect at the time of the decision that the council have made have changed. And I don't believe the EPA has changed its stance regarding the science. The information that was provided in the staff report was current from the EPA's website, and they continue to make those findings. And so we didn't have any kind of change agent that drew this report forward. We were asked to bring it as staff, but we don't have any additional information that would change our recommendation at this time.
See, and since you mentioned that there were other agencies here, I would love to hear from them about other factors, other considerations.
I don't, if either county or state representative would like to speak to it.
Council members, my name is Delia Jimenez Choke. I'm the Assistant Agricultural Commissioner for Riverside County Agricultural Commissioner's Office. I would be more than happy to answer specific questions if you have. Fortunately, I can't disclose any information that pertains to health effects, because our office only enforces the laws and regulations pertaining to label, which of course everybody knows the label is federal law. And I have with me here the Department of Pesticide Regulations, two representatives, so they can also answer any questions that you may have regarding application, the actual application of pesticide, its usage, and what type of inspections we conduct throughout the county and the city.
Thank you. And remind me, I know that we do apply glyphosate currently in adherence to the law and to the label. And when it comes to children, I hear the concern about children. I'm concerned about children too. I have two of them. What are the practices when we apply to parks, to playgrounds? What does that look like in the city of Riverside?
So perhaps I can let the city representatives, the folks here that can answer that question. Once again, I just want to say that we enforce the labels, and we conduct inspections on the application of the pesticide. So, for example, if I was the inspector, I would just do a routine inspection of someone who applies the chemical. I would I would verify that they are applying according to the label, which, like I mentioned, once the label is registered with the Environmental Protection Agency and with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, that's basically our Bible. That's what we go off of. So we have a form. We verify that the entity, the business, the city department, they have a license, or their personnel is trained, and other violations that may occur would be, actually I shouldn't speak about the violations. Other procedures that we follow would be to verify that the personal protective equipment that the applicator is wearing according to the label, that the rate that is specified on the label is applied. let's see, worker protection standards. I'm trying to figure out here what else. The physical and environmental hazards. Someone was speaking about the drift. We just want to make sure that every label that's registered with the state prohibits any type of drift. So the individual that is doing that application has to make sure that that drift doesn't occur, whether it's on a non-target species or bystanders, animals, etc.
So I'll pin briefly the question about parks and playgrounds, and since you mentioned that you are enforcing that we're using the product according to the label, what have you found when you've done your inspections in the city of Riverside?
So during the past year, we've conducted 121 total inspections. And out of those total inspections, and those are inspections that we conducted not just on the city, but on the businesses that apply glyphosate throughout the city. And we're talking about all products, Roundup, Roundup Pro, Quick Pro Max, all the glyphosate products. We did discover 15 violations. I don't have specifics as to the violations. However, my inspector, who's here with me today, just mentioned that a lot of the violations are paperwork violations. So just service container tag, possibly personal protective equipment that's not being worn, that's specified by either the label or regulations. So just minimum violations that we discovered.
Thank you. Now back to the question about playgrounds and parks. Randy?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Randy McDaniel, the Deputy Director for City of Riverside Parks Department. I am not the glyphosate expert, but I do know that we have licensed applicators. I do have Ryan Gibson here with me, who is licensed and can go over the specific process that we use in our parks. We don't drive-by spray. We do utilize it in our park system, though, for fire control is one of the primary uses, and asphalt and pavement to control weeds and stuff like that in that area. But if you want specifics on the process, I know that we're required to have a licensed applicator. We have signage that we post when we apply, but I can have them go over those details and I'll bring them up. Yes.
Hello, everybody. So, I oversee the pesticides in parks. So your specific question, playgrounds, schools. So we follow all the regulations. All of the staff is trained. There's an in-series training that they have to go through. So around playgrounds, we typically hula ho, smaller planter beds and stuff like that. But like Randy had mentioned, fire prevention is a big one. So some of the 100-foot breaks that we do around residential housing. But we do spray inside the parks, but we use best practices. So when we do spray it, it goes into the root system, prevents the plants from coming back. So was there any other questions? Like around schools, it's typically hula ho. We don't spray anything. And then a lot of the fire prevention areas, we may need like a permit to go in those areas. So to do any pesticide applications. So like mitigation areas or whatever, it's all hand mechanical means, so unless we have a permit to do so.
I heard you say that around playgrounds, it's typically
Typically.
hula ho.
Correct.
It's a new word for me, but not always. Can you
Yeah.
explain when you would or would not use the hula ho?
So it's all based, like fire prevention is a couple times a year. So around the playgrounds, we want it pretty weed free, right? So we spray, like I would say like once a month, we would spray and then use mechanical means. So a combination of both to take care of the weeds. There's some weeds like nut grass, for example. It develops a nut at the base, and if you hula hoe, it pops right back up. So hula hoe does not take care of it. You actually have to dig down like 12 inches. So yeah, like the rose garden. Sorry.
Must be why the nut grass keeps coming back in my garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only
So
one at a time.
So a combination of both, and we send over ag reports. So every time we spray, we send it to county ag, and they can see. So we tell them what park, how much we sprayed, and it all goes into a computer system. So if it shows on the label, like she mentioned before, right? If you go over a certain amount, they won't allow that. So they're who regulate us. So they, like she said, they do inspections, paperwork inspections in the field, making sure you're wearing your proper PPE and different things like that. So if we were to spray over the amount allotted for a certain park, they would automatically cite us for doing that. So.
And when you are spraying, I hear the paperwork that goes to the county. That's the correct entity. What about the notice that would be sent to people using the playground if you've sprayed glyphosate? It sounds like maybe once a month around a playground. How would people know how much time must elapse between spraying and use of a playground?
So each chemical, multiple chemicals, has like a duration of time. So like for Roundup, for example, when the product dries, then it's considered safe. So.
But no notice is given around the playground to let people know that the product has been used?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure my colleagues have questions as well, so I'll stop there
Yeah.
so they can ask their questions.
I just want to clarify that a notification for this type of product is not required by law or regulation.
Okay. I also remember when this came before us, and I had concerns then, as I have concerns now. And since then, we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, where many, many times we erred on the side of public health, even if we were doing something that would be disruptive, even if we were unsure of its efficacy. If it was erring on the side of public health, we would do it. And I think it should be no different with something like this. So I do have a question really quickly. I believe during the presentation, we said that we notify schools if we're going to spray near them, correct? Did you hear that? Yeah? Yeah. The presenter. Sorry. Yeah. You could just nod. I mean, I was trying to make you get up. So, but then under our own, right here, this says the EPA has found that there's no risk of concern to human health for current uses and no indication that children are more sensitive to it. Then why do we notify schools? Anyone can answer that if they want.
Schools. My name is Bob Simmons, and I'm in the street department, which makes me close, spray in the areas that are close to schools. In this area that I spray, there's only 2 schools within quarter mile of locations that we do treat. And it's a matter of contacting the school ahead of time, speaking to someone in a supervisory position, and letting them know, informing them that we will be treating on the canal behind the school or adjacent to the school. And so that way they can make arrangements to have the children in while we're treating. We let them know what time we're going to be there, or try to work it out where we can treat on a day where the children are not in school. So that's that. You know, but real quick, Lo, since I'm up here, as far as the toxicity, which is a bad word when it comes to pesticides, pesticides are graded, if you want to call it that, by a method that scientists use called an LD50, which stands for lethal dose to 50% of the population. And they use it on lab mice and stuff like that. And what it stands for is the lethal dose that it takes to kill 50% of the population of the tested animals. So, and when they do test, they test on a pure, regular concentration of the pure form that we buy that needs to be diluted. So Roundup has an LD50, which means you have to and the way they measure that is it's milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So, and Roundup is over 5,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight to kill half the population of their animals that they test. And so what that means is you have to ingest a lot. And this is the pure chemical. This is the concentrate, not what we do. What we do is we mix either 1 ounce per gallon if we're doing backpack treatments, or we do 1 gallon per 100 gallons. So this chemical that is being rated at 5,000 milligrams per kilogram, which is a large amount, it would take that much to kill half the population. Salt is much lower than that. Coffee, caffeine, much lower than that. We're talking like in the 500 milligrams per kilogram. And something like the Clorox wipes that you clean your countertops with in your kitchen, they're also in that less than 500 kilograms. So it takes a lot less of certain household chemicals that you have under your kitchen sink to treat or to injure test animals. So we have something that is at its full strength concentrate is a really high number. So the higher the number, the less toxic it is, and then we're taking it and we're diluting it down to where we're using 1 ounce per gallon or 1 gallon for every 100 gallons. So the fear, I don't know if that, I'm not trying to give you a science project because it's hard to understand.
No, we did get all this information the very first time we did this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, nevertheless,
yeah.
I just wanted to, it's not a random thing that, and I believe that the EPA, they have nothing to gain by lying or falsifying their findings on these things. California is the toughest state in the country to get any pesticide registered, and California is allowing it to be used here, and so I don't mean to blather on, but
no, it's okay. Thank you.
Just giving you a little bit more information on my side of the safeness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And certainly, immediate death, I don't believe is the concern here. Obviously, carcinogens in the body over time can create damaged cells, cancer, and I think that is more the concern of what I'm hearing. Obviously, we heard we get extensive training. Anyone who applies it, PPE is generally used, and those all tell me that there is some toxicity to this, right? We wouldn't do all that otherwise. And I did want to, actually before I do that, I'm going to speak to why we do it, right? We do it for weed abatement. And I believe that, yes, weeds do have fire risk, and I agree with that. And obviously, whatever the cost of clearing any weeds that have fire risk should be expended. Otherwise, weeds are just visually unattractive. And I think anytime we're going to be using a chemical, there should be a very good reason. And it sounds like majority of the reason is cost. And that is where most of my concern is. If it's a cost issue, then I think this is a discussion we should have with the full council, because then we are making an assessment of whether or not the risk is worth the benefit here being cost savings. And cost savings to me should never be in the same conversation as public health, even if the odds or the risk is low. And that was my opinion before, it's my opinion now. I did want to read, so Senator Cory Booker did recently send a letter to the EPA. And I just wanted to read from it just so it's in the record. Okay. Sorry. In 2016, the EPA issued glyphosate issue paper, Evaluation of Carcinogenic Potential, and consulted the agency's scientific advisory panel. The panel then issued its own concerns, similar to those of the Office of Research and Development, that EPA failed to follow its cancer assessment guidelines. Once again, the agency disregarded these concerns and in 2017 released a draft risk assessment finding that glyphosate poses no serious human health risk. EPA's most recent assessment in January 2020 interim registration review decision for glyphosate, which was subsequently struck down by the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, reaffirmed this stance. Given the serious risks associated with glyphosate, the agency's pattern of failing to adhere to its cancer assessment guidelines, and the court's vacatur of the human health portion of the agency's most recent human health assessment, EPA must ensure the most rigorous final assessment possible. It is unacceptable for the agency to continue to reassert conclusions built on inconsistent findings. And I urge Senator Cory Booker, I urge the EPA to closely follow its guidelines for carcinogenic risk assessment in its current review of glyphosate in order to protect our nation's public health from this dangerous chemical. And that's from a United States Senator, and I think those concerns are valid. So I'll stop here and just say that I think this is a conversation that should be had at the full council level to determine whether or not we want to move forward with this practice. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Sometimes I'm better when I can read it, so I'm curious, Councilmember Fier, if what you said there were inconsistencies. Can you repeat what those inconsistencies were, please?
It's hard to read off a phone. Would it be good if I just send this to you so you can read it? I don't want to have to read it to everyone again. Okay.
Thank you. Nathan, I have some questions as reviewing the old reports. I wanted to know the cost difference. I saw somewhere it's at $30,000 and then some at $60,000, and then in the current report, you broke it down by I forgot what, but I'm not going to do the math. So can you do the math for me?
Hey, you asked an engineer to do math. Thank you. It's a treat. So, Councilmember, one thing I would point out that I think is very relevant when we talk scale and numbers, just a comparison that stood out for me was that our landscape maintenance programs between Parks and Public Works total to just over $8 million. And when we talk about scale and cost, we look at Irvine, which has an integrated pest management program that leans primarily on organic herbicides and pesticides and manual removals, and their program is funded well over $20 million for a city that is a smaller size, which I believe has fewer roadway miles. So we would expect that we would look at over doubling our costs to have a truly effective program that would rely primarily on organics and manual removals. And the cost can vary depending on the combination of whether you rely more heavily on manual removal or spraying organic herbicides and pesticides, which do also come with their own warning labels concerning their use. It's different based on every product, of course, but that's the scale that we would look at.
So you're saying we're looking at going from an $8 million budget to a $16 million operating budget if we move to organic and other types of pesticides?
At least.
Okay. So thank you for comparing that to the city of Irvine. And you mentioned there was some other cities in the report. I think it was
Menifee was another one we looked at, where we heard that maybe they were doing something creative in the space or something different than what we were doing. From what we can tell, though, and in doing our research and reaching out, that it's not a mandate in Menifee, based on our research, that or there's no restriction citywide on glyphosate use, but their weed abatement program does require, when there's emergency weed removals, for the remover to use manual removal such as disking or mowing to eliminate those or abate those weeds. But I believe the reason for that is because that is an immediate way to remove a weed that's been deemed a public hazard, which could occur in the city of Riverside as well. If something that has to be taken out immediately from the right-of-way, we wouldn't necessarily apply spray. We've, for example, just this past weekend, gone out and manually remove weeds in locations. It really depends on the need driving that removal.
Well, we have talked a lot about Public Works being underfunded, right? That's been a conversation with us, for sure. And so I think that's a big piece as well, right? The staffing, which we'll talk about trees in a minute. But that's been the issue, right? Is the outsourcing of work, and then, you know, the divesting and the funding to that department. I think it is an issue. And I know we're talking about glyphosate, but I think it's a domino effect of everything, right? If we don't have the right funding for the department. So for me, you know, I've seen videos of staff not wearing the appropriate PPE, and I'm not a doctor. You know, you hear about cancer all the time. Again, I'm not in the medical field. However, I would hate for our employees to have these issues down the line, or our children, right? The community at large. So I think it's a concern. I know when we had the discussion a couple years ago, for me, when you look at, and you know, it's very staggering when you talk about going from 8 million to 16 million, when we can invest in streets and other infrastructure issues that we have. It's hard to make those decisions, but as some of my colleagues have said, when you look at people's health, public health, that's something that we need to prioritize as well. I hate to make decisions based on the funding, right? Where do we get the funding? But at the same time, when we're looking at what's safe for the community, what are best practices, it's always a difficult decision, right? So you know, if my colleagues want to move this to the full council, you know, where we can discuss it, maybe get more information from those experts on health risks to our employees, to the community, I'm okay with that. If one of you wants to make the motion.
I will, and I'll say that, you know, having a slate of options, right? If cost is an issue, then maybe there's a world where we use more traditional weeding efforts in areas where there will be walking paths, or where there's a reasonable expectation children will be, and then maybe more rural areas where there's less human traffic, maybe it can be used there as well. So a different amount of options that have the costs associated with them and what the cost increases would be, I think would be appropriate at the council level. Okay. So I'll make a motion to that effect.
To clarify, I thought that we already had those options in place. I thought, based on when we discussed this a couple of years ago, that we were thoughtful about where children were. We were thoughtful about different methods of weed abatement, not always relying on chemicals. And I really appreciate being able to see that mapped out. But isn't that already our practice?
Councilmember, we did provide, as part of this report, a map of where we do and don't apply glyphosate. And we do rely on our contractors, not only our city employees, to conduct weed abatement in the city. And I believe we are strategic in where we apply herbicides. However, in large part, I believe we rely on herbicides for removal. And when needed, we do rely on manual removal. But unless staff corrects me, I don't know if we have any notes. Yeah. So, you know, I think it's always an option that we have. And we use the best practices as provided by the regulatory agencies and the EPA, and the label, which is the law of the land, is what we really rely on to apply, so that we're consistent with other agencies and the guidelines related to the particular chemical. So in so much as we have variances in our practices, it's based on that label is how we apply it. If we'd like a suite of options, council member, that goes beyond label requirements, that's certainly something we could review and workshop. I don't know if the request would be to bring it back to the committee potentially as a workshop, because there might be a lot of different options, and I know that sometimes that might be overwhelming to bring directly to the full council, but we're happy to explore those options. And of course, we're just doing our best to provide you with our current funding situation. What would it take to do exactly what another agency is doing, and really just exposing you to that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree. Maybe it coming back to this committee might be appropriate, especially if there's going to be a lot of information. But that was simply, I'm trying to be reasonable as well, right? If there is significant costs, I would hate for the only option to be quadrupling the budget or not, right? So if the council's will is to do that, sure, but definitely having a suite of options would be, I think, appropriate.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I'll second your motion. I appreciate the suggestion, Nathan. I think that will be helpful because it sounds like our first priority or our first option is to use glyphosate, and maybe in the discussion in the future, it can be what it would look like if we use other methods first. And if it is a funding issue in terms of employees, or if it's an issue of we need to really work closer with our contractors, then that's something that we need to do as well, and that can be part of that discussion at a future land use meeting. So I'll turn to my colleagues to see if the member agrees.
I'm comfortable with the decision that we've made since it's already a discussion we've had, and it sounds like there haven't been any changes. I always appreciate further discussion, though probably would not be my priority at this point. So I recognize the majority vote, though I would be a no, but I'm happy to participate in the next conversation.
Thank you. We'll sub someone in for you. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yes, we welcome you back to the discussion. So it's not unanimous. Councilmember Edwards voted no, but it will come back. So thank you to everybody who's here. And Daniel, looks like you want to speak.
Yeah, just real quick.
Randy, sorry.
If I can make one suggestion, and one thing in the interest, as I was listening to the presentation, there's no reason, and the cost would be nominal for us to stop spraying in playgrounds, and I would at least propose to do that and make that a part of our policy moving forward. They're doing the hula hoeing right now to remove weeds. There's usually rubberized surfacing. Let's just eliminate that altogether. It'd be nominal cost, and so if we can take that off the table, so that's not part of the discussion item anymore, and I'm happy to implement that policy within our Parks Department to make sure it's clear of every employee that we're not going to be spraying, even though it's just a perception, because we're following the practices currently. But it would be, I think, a good goodwill and perception, and that we'll just implement that policy if that moving forward.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that.
Oh, follow-up question on that, and really appreciate that suggestion. Is that a policy that can just be implemented, or is that something that would need to go before council?
That would be an internal policy of practice, because we're following the proper procedures right now, and so it would be above and beyond what is required, and so we can just implement it starting tomorrow. So that's not something that if we get your support, and either way, I think it's a good practice to just stop doing it. So I would implement it even without the recommendation of council as I'm listening to it. I personally thought that we weren't doing that. So
I also thought that we were not doing
right.
that.
So it was, I was a little bit surprised to hear that we were doing it occasionally, and so I would like to eliminate that occasional, because it is not, as I'm calculating in my head, what's the cost of that? Is thinking how many, like 60-something playgrounds, probably 2/3 of them are rubberized. The cost is nominal. We can cover the cost of mechanized removal of weeds in our playgrounds and do it within our own budget. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Well, let's move on, because I know we have.
If I make a clarification to one of my previous statements regarding the posting. Posting is not required, so you don't have to have an actual posting, but the property operator has to give either written or verbal notification to anyone who may potentially enter the treated area. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who came to present, and I look forward to the conversation. So let's move on to agenda item 3, as we're running out of time, and there's probably another committee coming in at 5. So, Robert, not to rush you, because we're not going to rush you, but I just want to make sure we give you enough time to discuss the urban forestry policy manual.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and committee members. Robert Filiar, Urban Forester. It is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to provide you an update on the status of our urban forestry policy manual. As you know from previous presentations, we have been recognized by the Arbor Day Foundation as a Tree City USA since 1987 for the care we provide for our urban forest. And I'm proud to say I've been doing it for 20 plus years. I started doing it when it was just a young little teenager. The purpose of the manual is to provide guidelines to our staff, contractors, and the public for proper care of trees. A little background. Staff provided a progress report to this committee on January 9th of this year. The committee's directives were to update the branding of the manual to have a City of Riverside look and is consistent with city branding, provide a clear method on notification of removals to the community, provide options for the perpetual tree care and planting fund, and bring updates to the committee on the manual periodically. Also, staff provided a progress report to the Park and Recreation Commission on January 30th that was received and filed. Staff immediately began working on these directives. Our excellent marketing division for the city updated the look of the manual to have the look of the city and that is consistent with the branding of the city. On March 13th, a standard operating procedure came into effect for tree removal notifications. Oh, sorry, thank you, Nathan. My mouth moves faster than my finger. Standard operating procedures that came into effect for removals, notifications that included placing a sign by the tree advising the public of the removal, and if they have any concerns, to contact our call center. Staff is currently researching options on the most effective method on hosting a perpetual tree care and planting fund, and we are here today bringing updates to the committee as we had committed to. Unfortunately, the CAL FIRE grant is not yet accepting applications. However, I am excited to report that the United States Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, Urban and Community Forestry has opened up the Inflation Reduction Act that includes opportunities to fund the programs we are looking for that include creating a fully comprehensive tree inventory, developing an in-house database inventory management system, developing a long-term urban forest management plan built around our existing urban forestry policy, including setting a tree canopy cover goal, conducting tree planting and associated activities, and conducting education and outreach activities. We are actively pursuing this grant that has a deadline of June 1st. The grant does not require a cash match, only leverage funds. When we bring the manual update to the council for adoption, it will include details regarding our full grant application and any necessary recommendations for council to approve. Staff would like to proceed with the current draft manual with any potential grant funds going towards future updates and manual revisions. This is always a fun fact. Our urban forest has an estimated value of over $449 million. I wish I had that in my bank account. The city's urban forest provides social, communal, and environmental and economic benefits to the entire community. This aligns with our strategic priority 4, environmental stewardship, goal 4.5, maintain and conserve 30% of Riverside's natural lands in green spacing, including but not limited to agricultural lands and urban forests, in order to protect and restore Riverside's rich biodiversity and accelerate the natural removal of carbon, furthering our community's clients' resilience. Our recommendations today is that the Land Use Sustainability and Resilience Committee provide recommendations on desired modifications, if any, to the Urban Forestry Policy Manual, and recommend that the City Council approve the Urban Forestry Policy Manual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the presentation. We have one caller in the queue ready to speak on agenda item 3. Staff, if you can put the caller through, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Melissa McKee, Citizens United for Resources and the Environment. I really appreciate Robert's presentation and knowing that we are taking advantage of the grant that for $1.5 billion of potential monies for tree equity. I spoke at the recent City Council meeting on the Northside agricultural plan to point out that we needed to do that. We really needed to support our staff in any way possible with the grant writing since time is short, and how unique Riverside is because not only can we grow trees, but our trees provide food, which has the added advantage of being able to ensure that there's better produce potentially for many of our residents. The tree manual is nice. I'm glad it comports to our city brand. I would have liked to see it be a little bit more visionary and ambitious. For example, it discusses the fact we have somewhere in the 200,000 range on public trees. I would love to hear from Robert on, in a perfect world, what would you like to see? Should we be planting more trees in our medians? Particularly in those wards that have fewer trees. What kind of budget would that take? I am a big supporter of Public Works and RPU having more budget in terms of addressing climate change, not less. And I think there's almost unanimous agreement that trees are one of our greatest assets to offset the likely impacts of worsening climate and worsening pollution because of all of the logistics in our area. So this, to me, should be a priority of this committee, a priority of our council. We should be getting more resources to Robert and his group because we are and could be even better leaders than we have been in the past. And I'll close with this. 100 years ago or more, someone had the vision of what Victoria Avenue should look like. And today, it's such a huge asset of our community. In the 70s, when Measure R and C were passed, that was a very progressive and somewhat controversial thing to do to downzone land. And all of us have spoken about how a good specific plan would make a difference there because of the number of trees we have. We just need a lot more effort. So anything I can do to support the Public Works Department getting that grant, not sure what leveraging means, but we would really like to see that happen, and I hope that this committee will send that message to our new city manager and to the grant writing staff so that Robert gets what he needs. Thank you very much. Good job on the last item, by the way. Hard issue. Bye.
Thank you. And that is it for public comment. We have no other folks in the chamber ready to speak. Sorry, trying to talk and text at the same time. Any other callers? Thank you, staff. No other callers, so we're going to close public comment. And Robert, if you can join us, if you all don't mind, I just wanted to kick us off. Earlier, I emailed you some of the questions that Melissa had. Melissa McKeith, your #1 fan, according to, she didn't say that. She said she strongly supports Bob Fillier.
Thank you.
But we are your biggest fans because when we have a tree issue, we call you. So you're a small but mighty department, right? So I know #4, if you reviewed some of her questions, the one about the tree equity grant coming down from the Infrastructure Recovery Act. Have you looked into that yet?
That's correct. We are applying for the Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay.
And we're going to be asking $3 million from that.
And what would that $3 million go towards?
It's going to be going towards creating an in-house inventory system, doing additional tree canopy coverage analysis. It's going to be creating a full comprehensive tree inventory, developing a long-term urban forest management plan built around our existing urban forestry policy, including the tree canopy coverage goal, conducting tree planting and associated activities, and conducting education and outreach activities.
Great. She also had questions about the task force, who's on it, is it open to the public? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, we have the Park and Recreation Commission that is on the task force. There are 3 members from that. During that time, we invited members from the community that included the Inland Empire Urban Forestry Council, Victoria Avenue Forever, Riverside Corona Conservation District, and we also had CAL FIRE there as well.
Great, thank you. And then lastly, my question, we've talked about this before. How do you scale up, right? How, we have how many trees again that we're responsible for or are within the city limits?
Over 150,000.
So that's a lot. So what are we doing or what are you doing to scale up your department with either grant writers or ensuring that you're kind of going after the dollars, not just the grant money, but within our budget to advocate to expand that? Because if we're planting more trees, who's maintaining them, right? We've had these conversations when they meet their life expectancy and we have to take them out. Are we replacing them? So how are you scaling up?
Well, we are thankful to the City Council and Measure Z. We were given additional money. We were given $2,250,000 to increase our palm tree trimming. So that basically puts us on an every other year cycle that those palm trees will be trimmed. In addition, we've received additional Measure Z funding for our canopy grid trimming in the amount of over $1 million on that as well. That's got us from basically, we were pushing upwards of a 12-year cycle. We are now, thanks to the Measure Z funding in the council, we are about a 4 to 5 year cycle right now. Major improvement. Also, we were given $250,000 to increase our tree planting. So we can plant with that an additional 1,200 trees throughout the city. In addition, we have the tree people from the Transformative Climate Community Grant that is planting over 2,000 trees on the east side, and they are doing an amazing job out there.
And then will they be responsible for maintaining those trees or would we be responsible?
With the grant, they maintain it. I believe it was for 3 years, but it may have been pushed up to 5 years. After that time, the residents will water the trees and we will prune them as needed.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you have enough money. Just kidding.
No. No. But that's how we have been ramping up.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a lot more we can be doing, right? But thank you, Robert. I'll let my colleagues chime in.
Thank you. Well, first I'll move to approve. It was great. It was really wonderful to see the changes that you implemented since last time. And I think it's important that we worked really hard on this manual and it will continue to change over time. And we have plans in place to apply for more funding to do so. But now we have something out there that's better than what we had before. That's wonderful, yes. Even. So thank you so much for all of your work. So if you needed that motion, I'm happy to make it.
Did we? And Councilmember Fierro seconded, so I support as well. I don't know if you're done.
I'm not done.
Okay.
I just wanted quickly, I think it's page 23 of the manual. It looked to me that there were some items crossed out there that may have been crossed out in error.
We're currently still working on updating it. This was our rough draft.
Okay.
So we still have more items to add to it. We'll send it back to marketing to make sure everything is formatted correctly before we do take it to the full council for approval.
Okay. Fabulous. And I did not know, as it mentions on page 13, that with trees that are removed, we use them to make furniture and musical instruments in the city?
That's correct. Our current contractor, West Coast Arborist, actually has a contract with a guitar company that's based in Corona, and they actually make guitars out of like the chamois ash trees. They found that's better than mahogany wood.
So
It's Fender guitars. It's
Yeah.
the guitar company.
So you started with the fun fact about how much our tree canopy is worth. That is also a very fun fact, and I
Right.
hope we're highlighting that in other places. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Well, thank you so much. You have our full support to
Thank
move
you.
this forward with the edits that were mentioned. So thank you Thank you for all that you do. Again, I know you're a small but mighty team, and whatever we can do to continue to support your department.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, let's move on to communications, agenda item 4. Any items for future? Go ahead.
Yes, I have 2 items. The first is, I know that City Council had an update, I believe this may have been in 2019 or 2020, on Airbnbs. I meant to preface that both of these items that I'm about to mention have come from residents attending office hours requesting more information, and in some cases some changes. But for the Airbnbs, I would just like a similar update to understand since we're tracking them, do we have more Airbnbs now than we used to? And I know many people ask me what our ordinance is about Airbnbs. We don't have one, but it would be great, it sounds like, to update the public on information about Airbnbs. And then and have that come to this committee. And then the second item is, I would like us, now that we have several new people on the council, to re-explore urban chickens. Thank you.
Yes. We could have talked about that when eggs were really expensive. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, are they? I thought they went down, but I'm doing my Costco run later, so we'll see. Sounds good. Anything else we wanted to add? Thank you so much. That will close our meeting, and see you all next time. Thank you.